I'm sitting next to me, one such customer. And Deb, can you tell a few stories about what Dialog has meant for you and your
Sure.
career?
And what's interesting is watching, I've been around through all of these changes, and I'm just thinking, wow, I'm looking at the old catalogs that brought back a lot of memories. So I'll tell just a couple of stories. I know I'll just preface that with when Google came along, a lot of people said, well, that's kind of disintermediation. You know, librarians are going to go away. You don't need researchers to do this kind of work. But what we found is actually big databases that are curated, that are vetted, that have taxonomies and metadata make for much more targeted research. And I'll give you an example of that. I had a client, so I've spent most of my career outside of libraries, though right now I'm a library director, which is really interesting. I've come back to library land after being out of it for most of my career. But I still have my company, Information Edge, and I did a lot of pharmaceutical research. And you know, when you're talking pharmaceuticals, you're talking millions and often billions of dollars that are on the line. And I would have clients, I'll give an example. I had a client who, a large pharmaceutical firm that was considering introducing a new product and product line. But before they wanted to go down that road where they would be spending millions and maybe billions of dollars to bring a new product and product line to market, they wanted to know what their competitors were doing. What was going on? Was anybody else sort of probing down this same road? And so I was able to do, using the Dialog databases in one search, which I loved, allowed me to search across many databases at once, was able to do competitive intelligence research, and based on that research then provide an analysis and an executive summary with backup of all the articles that I had found that were really relevant to let them know that no, nobody else seemed to be going down that road. And so then they were able to go on and spend the money and the time to introduce a new product line, which made them a lot of money. So which was good. So they were really happy about that. And today, you know, you cannot do that on Google. There is stuff behind paywalls that you can just not get at. And we also, you know, when you have that kind of money riding, or you have people's health, in the case of pharmaceuticals, you don't want to be using information that may not be vetted or may not have all the details that are needed. I'll tell a couple of stories too about the thing that I really appreciated about Dialog and then ProQuest and all the iterations was that Dialog has always been a friend to, I usually don't say I'm a librarian because people yawn, so I say I'm a strategic knowledge professional, and then they go, what's that? And then I tell them what that is, and then I say, by the way, I have a master's in library science, and I go, I had no idea. So if you look at my LinkedIn profile after my name, it says strategic knowledge professional, you know, so people always want to know what that is. But that is really what librarians do, and of course, as was mentioned, a lot of the staff at Dialog had masters in library science, and so where was I going with that? Oh, I know. So one of the things that I think, having been president of the Special Libraries Association, we have another one in the room, former president as well, which is an international organization of specialist librarians, Dialog has always been supportive of the professions, whether it's SLA, Special Libraries Association, the Association of Independent Information Professionals, the American Association of Law Librarians, SILIP, which is in the UK, so many different organizations. So it was always a partnership. And I always felt that I knew when I had a tough question, I could pick up the phone and talk to those people on the other end of that 800 number and say, I am really stuck. I've got this research query and I'm just not getting the kind of results I need. And whoever was on the other end of the line, this was the thing I loved about Dialog, they were not stingy. They wouldn't say, well, if you search here and here and here, you can get there. They go, wait a minute, let me get online. And they'd spend 10, 15, 20, 25 minutes with you, and they'd say, oh, here's what I found. You should probably go here. Let me send you the results of what I've got. And then they would email it. So you didn't have to start from scratch or take a million notes. And that was something really valuable that I found. The customer service was amazing. That you could call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. When my kids were little and I was doing consulting work and searching at midnight while they were in bed, I knew I could pick up the phone and somewhere around the world there would be a Dialog support person that I could get a hold of and do the research that I needed to do. And all my clients were so happy because they knew they couldn't get this information anywhere else. One of the things when people will say to me, well, how, you know, why does that make a difference about you searching using these databases behind a paywall? And I say, well, why would you have an attorney who bills out at $450 an hour do their own searching on Dialog when they have professional researchers in their firm who can use databases to find vetted information. Those attorneys should be doing what they do best and leave to the information professionals what they do best so that they can get the information. And I'll tell you a story about that. Back in I think it was in the 80s, I was a librarian at a community hospital. And I was the only staff member in that library. I actually started the library from scratch. And a new product came out of the National Library of Medicine called Grateful Med. Yes, you can tell where that came from, right? And the idea was that it was going to allow physicians to do their own research. And so a couple of the physicians, or a couple of cardiologists who were really tech savvy, and they were so excited to have Grateful Med because they thought they wouldn't have to come to me anymore. So I said, great, try it out and let me know, because I tried it out and I didn't, as a power researcher, I found it really lacking. So they were so excited, they tried it out and they came back and they said, you know what? We're just going to let you continue to do the searching because it's not very good. We do what we do best, and you know how to do what you do best. And besides, you provide an analysis as well. You don't just hand us, a list of articles. And so that proved to me that there was still this value. I'll tell you another story about when I was at that hospital that really made it was a matter of life and death. So here I get a call, and it's the emergency room, and they have two guys. They're coming in by ambulance. They've been exposed to some chemicals, and they're having a very difficult time breathing. So it's a small community hospital, and they're going, what do we do? So, and this is before Google was around. So they called, and so I get on Medline and Embase, and I start in some scientific databases, and I start doing a search. And I have this partial list. They don't know everything they've been exposed to, but they've given me a list of what they do know. And I was able to immediately then call down to them. Actually, I ran down there. I called and said, I'll be down, and I had some stuff to bring them. And by the time they got in and they were being examined, their lives were saved because we were able to work together as a team, which was a really wonderful thing. So after that, my popularity in the hospital soared because it was like everybody said, oh my gosh, she can save lives. And I'll tell you another story that's not so much about saving lives, but making a difference in lives. And that's why I think Dialog to me represents that. It really changed lives. Both those who were the searchers, but those that they were doing the research for. So when I was at University of Nevada in Reno, I did a lot of research for students and professors, and one particular search I will never forget, it's been 30 years or more, had a high school teacher who had come back to university, and he was working on his PhD. And he wanted to write his dissertation about resident camps, summer camps for children who were differently abled, who were not able to go to typical overnight camps. So he asked me if I would do some research. So I said, well, let's look at dissertation abstracts and a few other places to see if somebody's already done this kind of work. And he was so excited because we couldn't find anything. And we had a lot of going back and forth, doing what we call a reference interview to find out what he was really after. And I got to know him quite well. He would keep me updated. He'd go before his committee, and here was his proposal. So then he knew I was really interested. So he said, come up to the camp. It was on the shores of Lake Tahoe. It was so beautiful. So I went up there, and camp was in full swing. And here were kids in wheelchairs, kids who, were just differently abled than, kids that would be able to go to a regular camp. And there was this amazing experience. It still touches my heart to this day, because there were volunteers who were working there, and everybody was so happy. It was truly life-changing for these kids and teenagers. And after all these years, I still have that feeling, but Dialog made that possible because I was able to search for him so that he could do this great work. Sorry, I told myself I wasn't going to get emotional, but this is what Dialog is all about. I guess the last thing I'd like to say is that today I've done, in the past, consulting work for a lot of large companies and small companies, for-profit, not-for-profit. And Boston Consulting Group is one place where I used to do a lot of consulting work. I used to go in and be one of their kind of on-call researchers, which was really interesting because they would work those poor young consultants to death. That's why none of them stuck around after they hit 30. They probably went off to another company because they were traveling so much. But they'd come call, or they'd come send an email or come over and say, I'm leaving in 3 hours for Tokyo and I need to know da-da-da before I go meet with this client. And so we knew that the Dialog databases would always have the information we need, no matter what the topic it was, whether it was UPS when they introduced handheld, you know, when they come to your door, or FedEx and you sign the little thing. Well, that was when they were first introducing those, and they needed to know if they dropped them on a concrete floor, would they still work, you know, all kinds of stuff like that. Or getting Wi-Fi to be on a ship, a cruise ship, you know, satellite technology. So the topics were all over the place. But Dialog always had, of those 400 plus databases, somewhere that you could find the information.
And I guess I would just supplement Deb's comment by saying, if there's one thing that customers came to Dialog for, it was precision search.
Yeah.
Because you could find in this broad, multidisciplinary environment of databases, you could use that recursive searching that Pete talked about and hone right in on just the few things that mattered. So it wasn't getting a lot that was important in a Dialog result. It was getting just the right stuff.
So instead of getting 1 million hits with Google, you got the 10 targeted ones that most, especially somebody in a C-suite, the CEO, the CFO, whoever, they don't want to see 100 citations. They want to see the top 5 with an executive summary about what does this mean. And Dialog provides that ability for strategic knowledge professionals to be able to provide that.
Wow.
That's it.
Great story.